What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to episode 14 of the LA Report with your co-hosts Eris Morrison and Linjo Kilo.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you guys rocking with us for this latest episode. Season 1 is finally coming to a bit of an end. But before we do end season 1, we have a very special guest joining us today, Mr. William Anderson. And I'm going to let Linjo kind of give a little brief bio about him.
Yes. Thank you so much, Eris. William Anderson, he's married with 2 sons. After 20 years of service, he retired from the U.S. Army with honors. After retirement, he immediately began working in the insurance sector with AIG, American General, a nearly $500 billion company that was bailed out by the U.S. government in 2008. Over a 10-year span, he was able to work his way up from agent to trainer to middle management. He eventually left the company due to a racial discrimination issue concerning a new management position. He filed a suit in federal court, but was forced into arbitration. The company was found guilty, but the presiding arbitrator violated multiple misconduct laws to avoid punishing AIG for racial discrimination. The lower courts have refused to address his motion to vacate the arbitrator for the misconduct, and he has now petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court. And currently, he's awaiting their decision as to whether or not they will accept his case, and believes the outcome will affect the entire world when it comes to arbitration and our constitutional rights. So, without further ado, William Anderson, we really thank you for being here, and we definitely
thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. We definitely want to dive into your story to get some more background about this. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how this lawsuit came to be?
Well, like I said, I retired from the military and went to work for AIG, American General, big company, hit almost $1 trillion, I believe, before the bailout of 2008. So they were a big company. And what happened is, after about 10 years, I was going to actually resign and go to work for, HBCU, and working on getting I had a master's and I wanted to get a doctorate degree. And, of course, they would pay for it. So I had an opportunity to do that. But to keep me there, they offered me a management position, at least to compete for it, per se, that was coming up in a couple of months. Big money. It was going to pay a pretty good amount of money. And what they did ultimately is that they, instead of taking my credentials, because I knew I was probably the most qualified there was 3 blacks and 1 white. All 3 of us blacks were actually qualified. I had a master's degree in human resources and a master's degree in management leadership, was a manager, had military experience. And the other 2, black people, they also had some pretty good credentials. The white guy had none. He just happened to be friends with the regional vice president over the region. They were what I call drinking buddies, smoking buddies, smoking cigars. But he had played in a band for like 30 years, no experience at all. And they decided to do a contest, a sales contest. Crazy. And in that contest, they controlled the numbers, and they were shutting our numbers down and yet trying to help him get his numbers. And I got wind of it and found the evidence of what they were doing. So they promoted the guy and then tried to offer me a lesser position, losing money when I called them on it. And when I told them no, they literally told me if I didn't like it, to take a hike. I could leave, after they had delayed me for months from going to take this other position. So I decided to fight back. Filed a lawsuit, federal court. They fought, forced me into arbitration.
Wow, that's very unfortunate. Now, you say that you were forced into arbitration. Like, so how did that process happen? Like, how did they just come up and say you're going to go into arbitration?
Well, when I filed in federal court, did my case up, they came back and said, hey, he signed an arbitration agreement that said he could not go to court. He could not sue us, in state or federal court or even small claims court. Now, when I first joined the company, I didn't sign one. Then years later, around the 2008 period, when the world changed, they tried to get me to sign one, and I have wrote under duress, because by then I understood what arbitration did. Didn't see myself getting into a lawsuit years later, but they told me if I didn't sign it and take the word under duress out, they would fire me within 2 weeks. That was big back then. And so what happened is, when I filed in a lawsuit and they came back and said, "You're going to arbitration." I said, "No, y'all had rules. I tried to follow the agreement, and they violated it and refused to follow it themselves. So I said, you breached." So they argued back and forth with my attorney did with the federal court, going back and forth. And ultimately, the federal court said, well, it's going to be for an arbitrator to decide if they breached the agreement or not. But of course, the arbitrator immediately said, they didn't breach it. I'll hear the case. Without hearing out my evidence, without letting me present any of the breach, anything. It's what happens in arbitration. They don't give us any considerations. It's a world where they're going to be taking a lot from us, and I'll explain that as we go along.
Right. Yeah, man. Like, to be honest, even within myself, the word arbitration comes up, like even when it comes to like, contract agreement. When I said like I played pro ball for a couple of years overseas, and also played it here in the States in the G League, and I've seen the word in my contract, but I never really understood what arbitration was. So now that, I'm hearing your story, I'm like, dang, like, what if something happened to me and I wanted to, sue my team? Would I have been restricted by the contract that I signed? So, stories like this definitely, shed light on how we should be more cognizant and how we should definitely fight for our rights all the way through, So that brings me to my next question. So what has been the outcome thus far with, post the federal courts and now trying to get things to the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm glad you said it about the athletic thing, because even in pro ball, and I'm gonna tell you about the outcome. Those arbitration agreements are to protect big business. So yes, when a person gets hurt in sports and they have an arbitration agreement, if you go before a jury, your peers, they're gonna be understanding. An arbitrator is bought and paid for by the company. And so if you had gotten hurt and it was their fault and they had a contract on you, they're going to say, okay, you sue them for whatever reason, whether it's discrimination, injury, death of a child based on something they did, whatever, you're going to go before an arbitrator. And arbitration is biased. So in the outcome of mine right now, from the beginning to the end, they were pro the company. And when I say that, the only reason I won what I did was because I gathered up some information that I told you about, some evidence that when we asked for additional paperwork, AIG refused to give it to us. In a court compelling discovery, they can make them bring it forth. But in arbitration, it's the arbitrator's decision whether to make them produce the evidence or produce the reports, financial reports, whatever it is. It could have been your injury reports. If you were injured, what happened and how it happened. If they don't want to produce them and the courts are saying it's all on arbitration, then you go nowhere. And so the only way if they make a final ruling against you or however they do it, you can't appeal like a regular judge and your peers. You got to prove misconduct, and they only have 4 misconduct laws. And then you got to appeal to have that final ruling vacated, which means set aside because they did some kind of misconduct or fraud. So even though I went through the federal court saying, this lady violated my constitutional rights, used false evidence, did a whole lot of things just to keep from punishing AIG. AIG $500 billion. She didn't want to punish them because in order to punish them under Title VII, which they were guilty on, and Section 1981, they would have made this brother pretty rich. They didn't want to do that. So even the 11th Circuit Court in appeals, they danced around it and found a way to not back up me, and they bagged up the arbitrator. So that's what you're going to find out about arbitration, that the bottom line is the numbers say they are for big business, and for the employer, you're not the employee, not the athlete, not just the owner, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, that's very profound right there. Yeah, that really is really opening my eyes to really, be more aware on the things that I sign, and being more aware how I can protect myself, and even for others though that are listening and others that I may know, like trying to encourage them to think twice and really read through the things that you sign, because you don't want to sign your rights away, because like you said, it's for the employer and not the employee.
Right.
Definitely a very unfortunate, circumstance that you're in, William, for sure. And definitely hoping that the Supreme Court picks up your case. So obviously you stated at the beginning this was based upon discrimination. Do you believe that forced arbitration kind of hurts people like ourselves, people of color, or more than other demographic of people per se?
Oh, absolutely. What I'll say is this, when you give business or certain demographic of American, what I call a weapon, whether it's the Constitution or whatever it is how you use it. So if you know that per capita, there's a disproportionate number of, say, people of color in jail compared to who are not of us, not us. So when you
Right.
understand, you give them a weapon. And this weapon is saying that anything that we do out there to you, whether it's wage issues where we didn't pay you right, contract issues, hurt you physically, or discrimination. And we know that discrimination is mostly used by people of color, bottom line. And that's one of the biggest things they're covering. So they've effectively having us wipe out our rights we got from the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by clicking away. I mean, whether it's on you'll see it and you become aware of it now. Every time you get an email account, it's going to say sign these agreements, and hidden inside that agreement is that little word of arbitration clause. You go to do an online banking. In order to do online banking, they're going to have you sign this thing, and they hidden this little bit of clause in there that says you cannot sue us no matter what happens. Lease an apartment, buy a house. I've come across cases where people, husband and wife, bought a house in Florida, got messed up by the bank. Arbitrator knew the bank was guilty, but decided to violate the rules and mess that couple's credit up, mess their house up. Guilty as all get out, just like in this case with AIG, guilty as all get out, but will not punish them because they won't repeat business. They may only see me once, but AIG is so big, and these Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whoever you name, they're big. This is going on all the time, and it's considered private, not public. So they're actually doing this all the time to people. And when you talk about using it, the weapon is going to be used against us as people of color. They're going to make sure we have no rights when something happens to us and we've lost a job or a position or a contract. You're a small business, you got a distributor, they do something to mess your business up. Or like I talk about this COVID thing. This is going to be terrible with COVID. I had a friend, I just buried my friend a few weeks back, died from COVID, got it on the job. They're not going to be able to sue. They found ways that you can't even sue if the COVID got put on you at your job. They enacted laws for that. I don't know if you've been watching that, but they have. So they're going to use this against us. And the younger generation is going to feel this even more, because as it gets stronger and stronger and things start happening to the younger generation, they're going to look up one day and say, what did the MLK fought for? Our freedoms, our rights. All of a sudden, I didn't even realize it. I clicked it away, or signed on page 3, and yet up there on page 2 is a little small clause that says I can't sue, nor can I receive punitive damages if they do something to me. It's going to be terrible in the years to come.
Without question, man. It sounds like for those of you listening out there, obviously there's many important points in this conversation, but definitely one that I've caught on to is, being very wary and very, very careful with what you sign, and making sure you read over documents. Like you said, these are, everyday contracts that we sign, like you mentioned, through emails, when signing up through banks, even if you're on the job. So for those of you out there, make sure that you read these contracts, because it does limit your ability to take action, it sounds like, for sure. Especially when it comes to, again, what we're talking about with arbitration. So your case has now been submitted to the U.S. Supreme Court. In your opinion, obviously, why is it so important that they accept it? Like, is it more, obviously we want you to get the justice that you would do, but why do you feel like this is, again, so important an issue moving forward for our generation as well?
Right, because what I've seen in my research and what's going on, I've hired legal clerks to look up cases for me that show where an arbitrator was vacated for misconduct, and I've hired 3 different ones, including a lawyer who went to a lot of research, and they could not find a single case to help me showing when an arbitrator was vacated for misconduct. You're talking about nationwide. that dealt with what I was dealing with. So I thought that was pretty astounding that thousands of trials are held every year, thousands, and yet we couldn't find not one. And since when you understand what the Supreme Court is doing, arbitration is here to stay for a while. It's not going anywhere. Actually, it's getting strengthened. Supreme Court is backing up arbitration. And so my case is as I said in my, I got a petition that's being signed in my thing. I'm saying if a case is strong as mine with evidence documented 5 different ways, I got it. I caught it all documented. And if the Supreme Court doesn't accept mine, and then one of the things the arbitrator did is that they made up some evidence that did not exist. I call it non-existent. It's like someone saying there was a gun involved in a fight, and the judge is saying it, and you saying, no, there was no gun. Neither side said there was a gun. I know that's going a bit extreme, but just think about what I'm saying. If an arbitrator says, this is why I'm ruling against you on one of your claims because there was a gun that was on the scene. The police didn't say it. The lawyer didn't say it. Either side said it. And you said, whoa, Madam Arbitrator, where did you get that from? No one said anything about a gun. And the arbitrator said, well, I want to help them get a self-defense claim to help them. So I'm going to say it was a gun involved. That's a violation of what you call due process, false evidence covered under the 14th and say the 5th Amendment in civil, mostly criminal. So this arbitrator did that. So I'm challenging where she violated a constitutional law, and they're protected on this thing called fact finder. So this is what's very important. When an arbitrator issues their final ruling, even they can't change it. You have to prove misconduct to get anything changed. It's out of their hands. They're free. They wash their hands. They get paid by the company. They go on about their business. You're left with the damage. You got to prove misconduct. My arbitrator did something unique, and that issue what they call an interim award before the final award. And I was able to see all the misconduct, the false evidence she was using, the giving them a defense they didn't ask for. I just caught, and I said to her before her final award, you can't do this. And I pointed out what they call a request for reconsideration. You're violating the law. You can't do this. Most arbitrators are protected under this thing, and it's going to destroy people. It's called fact finding, and they are able to do what they call even clear error. In other words, they're allowed to make mistakes that judges can't. They're allowed to make mistakes and misinterpreting the law, and all the judge got to say, they must have misunderstood you during the trial. It's called fact finder protection. It's right there in black and white, which means we can almost never win. My arbitrator entered an interim award and let me see what she was doing before her final award. So I'm telling the Supreme Court, now that she's deliberately violated my constitutional rights, are you going to let that happen with this false evidence? Because if you do, that means an arbitrator for anybody else out there can make up something, a lie, create evidence, and it be protected, which means we will never win in the future. We will all get hurt, from athletes, probably maybe movie stars, but let's just talk about the common people. Those of us who are making, what they call under $100,000 a year, the small people, 50,000, you're not going to stand a chance against big business. So we need the Supreme Court to accept this case where we check and arbitrate and get what I call one case on the book. Because if I had all that research done and they couldn't find not one, we found out what they put in for it and it was denied. Mine is stronger than any we found, and none of them were ever granted. That's why I said we couldn't find one when one was actually vacated. So,
yeah, that definitely sounds like there wasn't any precedent prior to, like you mentioned, any cases where they've overturned or found any evidence of what you were just saying. So that's precedent is very key, like you mentioned, as far as any court system, specifically the Supreme Court, when trying to go against, I guess, arbitrators and what they've done in the past. But it's very unfortunate and obviously interesting. You mentioned, you have this evidence in place where, you're able to bring forth, and, typically, obviously being a black man in America, we understand, should have an understanding It's not about what's right or wrong when it comes to the judicial system, as much as it is what it is that you can prove. And it sounds like you have all the evidence in your hands to be able to prove the wrongdoings that this arbitrator has done. So I mean, just listening to your story here, I feel very confident in your ability to obviously relay and express yourself, but obviously it has to reach the Supreme Court at this point. So, yeah, definitely a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that you work with, some lawyers, and I was kind of curious as to, how that process like goes about. Like, so I guess my question would be like, what amount of legal expense can a person expect to spend if they are forced to bring their issue before an arbitrator?
Well, that's an excellent question, because as we see all these shows on TV, Judge Mathis and all those are really arbitrations. But out here in the real world, it's not court TV. Now, if it happened to an employer and you can go to what they call small claims, if your case is not that big, let's say they owe you $1,000, you can go down to the court, file a claim, represent yourself, go up there and tell your story. You can even, in some cases in the lower state court, ask for a jury and just go in there and tell your story. Now, in state courts, you may fumble through it, but if you didn't have the money for an attorney, you can write out your case on some plain paper and go through it and like fumble your way through it. And of course, the judge is going to keep you on track. So if you chose to do an attorney, it's just whatever the attorney charges and what they're going to get percentage. In my case, I'll say, because my case was going up against a big company. When you're talking about 500 billion, they got lawyers everywhere. So in me, I wound up paying a $10,000 initial retainer to my attorney, but I found one that said he would do it for $3,500, $5,000. Not, but I spent $10,000 up front just to retain. By the end of the case, with paying expenses and flights and all that, I spent over $20,000. Now, not everybody has to do that. Not everybody has to do that. So that's why when you come to arbitration, it's so stacked against you. After going through this process and seeing how they play the games and there's no judge or jury to check them, in arbitration, if you're going for something that has a bigger money amount, you're going to need an arbitrator. The system knows this. This is what I'm telling you, most people. Small claims court, people go to that all the time, and they usually win. State courts almost always, if you're in the right and you can prove it, you're more than likely going to win. Their statistical numbers say you're more than likely going to win. So they will settle with you before they let you take them to small claims court or even to state court, maybe in federal court if you could. When it comes to arbitrator, they already know the odds in their favor. They just sit back and watch you give up, because if you are owed, say, $2,000 or $3,000, and you got to go out there and hire an attorney's not going to want to get a 30% of $3,000 they owe you. So you're going to just walk away, and the company knows this. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people who run into this, and it's because it's private. It's happening to people all around us. So the expense could be very little, or based on the attorney, a lot. And like I said, in my case, because I was going up against a mega $1 billion, $500 billion company who had rich lawyers on their payroll, it cost a lot. And they know this. So even though you have a strong case like mine did, they rolled the dice that they didn't have to settle with me, because they knew they bought and paid for this arbitrator. And this arbitrator did exactly what they expected. Had to find them guilty. But what's the use of being guilty if you're not going to go punish? They know that. They went unpunished. They didn't even give me back the money I spent on my attorney. That's why when my case is this strong, I refuse to back down. And I'm pushing forward when I realize this is for not just me, but this is for all the brothers and sisters and people of color out there who they're isolating, making us not, because remember, arbitration also says you can't join a class action suit. And either it may happen to, like in this case, the other two Black people with me, we couldn't go together. They made us go separate if we want to file a suit. We got to all get our own attorney and do total different. That's how they separate you, keep you separate. So It
Yeah,
could be expensive, and they
well,
know,
no,
and that's why they don't have nothing to lose. They're gonna just sit back and watch you walk away. Don't even go to arbitration because sometimes it's too costly.
I see, and along with it being costly, I'm sure it can be very time consuming as well. So that kind of brings me to my next question as to, how long has your case been going on, and what other challenges have you faced, aside from trying to get this to the Supreme Court? Or what other challenges have you faced with the case?
Well, it's been going on for years. I mean, I went to trial in 2018, but
Hmm.
getting to that was I had to file through the EEOC because it's Title VII. So most people, if you're going to go on a Title VII claim, or the 1964 Civil Rights Act, you got to go through EEOC. I have no problem saying this because it's the truth. I did my research. I knew it. It's almost a joke. They make you wait a year or so to come back and tell you, oh, we're not going to take your case. Here's a letter, give you the right to sue. So you have to wait all that time just to have your right to sue letter. But I also filed up under Section 1981 for race discrimination, which you can do immediately. But I had a Title VII claim, which made me wait. So then when they fought me through federal court, getting to 2018 and forced me to arbitration, that was about a couple of year process. So understand that the arbitrator who had to decide whether the breach, they had an incentive. If they found that AIG breached their agreement and I was able to go to my federal case that was stayed, they wouldn't get paid. So the arbitrator violated the first number, what they call the second law, third law, misconduct law, which is called refusal to hear evidence. She directly says, I'm going to make a decision without hearing your evidence. And my attorney said, but ma'am, you're making a decision on our case without hearing our evidence. Her answer was, I don't need to hear any evidence. And my attorney said, but you're making a ruling on our case and you haven't seen any of our evidence. She said, I don't need to see any of your evidence. There was like what they call a initial conference call. She did this on a phone call, introducing everybody. And
Hmm.
throughout part of my case without any evidence because she wanted to get paid. And I brought that, I said, that's the power they have. And no one has said anything about it, even though it's one of the misconduct laws that's listed there in black and white. So yes, it's become the process, and I just have to stay with it through the federal, then the 11th, now up into the Supreme Court, because I was telling my wife and my friends, this is not about me anymore, just me. This is about what I say the law is pulling the bag over a lot of our heads, and we don't even know it. So when we click in these agreements on these cell phone apps, I bought a new Garmin, what you call the GPS. I had bought them before. Now it has an arbitration agreement on it that tells you if you don't click yes, you can take this Garmin back to the store within 7 days and we'll give you your money back. That was
Wow.
amazing to me. Go try to rent a car. They're going to tell you to sign an arbitration agreement. The car blow up on you, whatever, kill your family, you can't sue them. So
Wow.
yes, it's sometimes time consuming. And people who maybe only are out of $1,000 for lost income, they may not want to fight for that $1,000. They walk away, and the big business is laughing all the way to the bank.
I see. I see. So, that actually is man, it's so unfortunate, and we thank you again for standing up in this fight, because like you said, it has been time consuming, but we personally feel like what the effect this can have for future generations is worth the time that you're putting in. um and I also was kind of curious, like, so how has your case affected your livelihood of you and your families? I'm sure things have definitely changed between that dynamic because of the case.
Well, that is something. I'm gonna talk about just the stress of it, and this is just a personal thing. When this first occurred, we had just found out that my wife was pregnant with our youngest son, and the hammer was dropped. The income dried up because now I consider myself forcibly taken out. How they said, constructively discharged, because I'm fighting them and retaliations was going on. All kind of stuff was going on. And so it wasn't just the money we've lost. I came out of pocket, had to pay this attorney, and loss of income while you're working. The stress throughout this whole process of knowing you were done wrong by all people, by the company, by the legal system, and you know justice isn't coming, and you're under stress, so that affects your relationship with people around you. You can't help it. I mean, you try to put it on the back burner. You try to say, that I'm a cope with both of this and my family. But in the truth, I knew during the pregnancy, I was not emotionally there. And me and my wife talked about it later, and she felt that. She said, I felt like you were so consumed with trying to defend it. But I said, yes, I was, because they were taking our livelihood, taking our child's future away. I want him to, have a good future. And they just pulled the rug out from under me, cost me the opportunity to get my doctorate, my PhD, then told me to literally kick rocks if you don't like what we're doing to you. So yes, that was stress, and it has affected my family. But God is good in a way, because there was things that happened when, like they say, when one door was closed, another one opened up. So He began to open up doors for me. I don't mind giving praise to God. Open up doors for me that made me do okay, but it still didn't take away the stress, knowing that I have to fight this fight to the end and not be taken out and put down on my knees and just walked over. They may take me out, I always say that, but not on my knees. They're going to take me out standing up for me, my family, my friends, and in this case, the rest of the world, the younger generation. I got a son who's just graduated college, in 2018. I'm doing this for him also. Yeah.
Without question, man. We definitely again appreciate you and sharing your story with us. And I always say, man, unfortunately, yet somewhat fortunately, from a certain standpoint, us as Black folks are like God's persevering people for sure. So we always have had to do things the hard way or come up the hard way by no fault of our own in certain situations. So we definitely have faith that you will see your case to fruition and like I said, get what you rightfully are owed. And you kind of touched on this. We had a final question here for you. You kind of discussed it throughout the course of this interview. How what would you say, or how would you say, people around the world, and we don't want to just limit ourselves, but again, specifically speaking to people of color, how can we protect ourselves going forward from arbitration, dominating the world in terms of the way that it's run and the circumstances it puts people through?
Well, you all said something earlier that was really key, that you said your attention now that you begin to read stuff. They say sometimes the best way to keep us from knowing stuff is to hide it in a book or hide it in a small print. So the problem is, as you said, when you read it yourself, you can't get the product unless you go ahead and agree to it. That's why they put it in there. So because the world is going there and you can't get that job, or you can't rent that car, you can't get that bank account, online banking, you can't lease that apartment or get that mortgage unless you sign this. That's why they call it mandatory forced arbitration. What you can do to kind of protect yourself is, first of all, if it happened to you, collect the evidence, all you can before you even file your complaint with HR or with the EEOC, because once they know you're going after them, they will hide evidence, because they can do that during arbitration. No one's going to compel them to bring forth evidence. You're on your own. So you collect that evidence. Don't let the right hand know what the left hand doing. Get the evidence, then file your complaint. Then pay for a court reporter like I did. That's what cost me some money. Pay for the court reporter, have all depositions recorded, have the trial recorded. That's why I was able to say that testimony and what you're saying was not given. It's nowhere in the docket record. No one ever produced it. And if the case is big and it's money involved, it may be worth paying that court reporter. If it's smaller, maybe not. If you ain't got that much to lose or that much have to gain. But the key to it is read. We're being blindsided because it's so easy to just click that. You don't want to scroll through all that stuff. But if it comes to your house, your job, your grandmama, them going into a nursing home, or your child going into a hospital setting, or you signing stuff away and don't realize it. So all of a sudden your parent or your spouse or your boyfriend, girl, whatever you have, die in the hospital, and you sign that admission paperwork and have an arbitration clause on there. Doctor malpractice. You can't sue them. got to go to arbitration. That's how we can protect ourselves, just by getting the word out and being aware. And in the future, we got to get our senators and our mayors and stuff to address this for us. We have to get this arbitration thing dealt with. And even if we don't, we have to make the arbitrators rule right. Because if they were doing right by us, this wouldn't be an issue. They're doing right by big business because big business is the one paying them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, making sure that we have all of our information, all of our evidence before we, step out into that arena, and you made a very key point. We say this all the time on our show, and we stress to our listeners how important it is to get involved in our politics, especially on the local and state level, so that we can have people that advocate for our needs. A lot of people don't even realize how much arbitration affects their lives on a day-to-day basis. Like, even me personally, I didn't understand it until we had this competition now. That, dang, for me to live in my apartment, I had to sign this. For me to use my phone, I had to sign this. So, everywhere we go, we're being, hit with, arbitration clauses that we're signing unknowingly. So making sure that we can get to a point where our policymakers are advocating for us to protect us from these things is very key. And, once again, and we really appreciate you for, your fight in this and making this case stick. And we really wish you all the best. And for anyone that is listening, make sure you all follow the Instagram page and follow the case at One Voice, number 4, Justice. So One Voice for Justice, and sign the petition in the bio, because we at TLAR Report, we want to make sure that we help our brothers and our sisters, fight for the right things, fight to make change so that we can have a better outcome and a better future. So again, William, we really appreciate you for everything that you're doing, and we'll definitely stay update with you and see how the case goes.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate both of you having me on your show. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed your insight. I enjoyed your questions, and allowing me to express myself. It was awesome.
Well, thank you again, William. And, for the audience out there, again, just take heed to his words, because as he so eloquently articulated, this can happen to any of us with everyday contracts. So again, William, we'll definitely be in touch.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Can I say one last thing? I didn't mean, but I was saying this because I think about, what we got with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all them. These things were happening to people all the time. And then, like I was called George Floyd's case, this guy had did so many things prior to that it was kept in the dark. My case is, I'm not comparing it to George Floyd by no means, nowhere near it. But in the sense of, there's things going on out there all the time in the dark. I just happen to be in a position where I'm trying to shine a spotlight on it, just like someone having a camera when Arbery was killed in Georgia, or Mr. Floyd was killed, where it's a spotlight. But this, we jump on that and support them because we feel what happened to them. We hope it never happens to us, but we realize it can. Just like they did. Someone can break into my house, kill me or my wife. We also have to realize that this arbitration can happen to all of us because we're signing our rights away every day. And eventually it's going to happen to a lot of us, but we're not going to know about each other because they separated us. We got to unite. We got to, especially the younger generation. It's really about them. It's about my son. It's about the people coming up who this is going to really affect for many years of their life. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was important to understand it, though it may not happen to you, it could.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. And, one more time, y'all, please follow the page One Voice for Justice. That's the number 1 voice, number 4 justice. And please sign the petition in the bio and follow the case. Because like you said, just because you may not see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And, like you also said, we have to unite. So if one of us is going through an issue, we're all going through an issue. So
Right.
let's make sure that we stick together and we move towards, you know, a better outcome for all of us.
I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed.
And with that, we thank you guys for tuning in. And with that, we say peace.
Peace.